And I appreciate everybody taking the time to be here today. As he mentioned, I'm Ryan Walsh, CEO of Valqari. I have 28 patents in drone delivery and the infrastructure space. So I've been working on this for over 8 years, and it's kind of all I think about every day. Um, as a lot of the presentations today have really highlighted, drone delivery is a when, not an if. And, everything from, the volocopter where you're carrying these large cargoes all the way down to these companies listed here, a lot more uh, use cases are popping up with drones. And the question really starts becoming, how does this integrate into our everyday lives? We already have certain aspects figured out. We're looking at remote ID and UTM. But the big problem is, what does this actually look like at scale in day-to-day use when you have hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of drones in flight every day, every minute? And so when you're thinking about this, where are these drones going to recharge? Where are they going to drop packages? Where are they going to be stored when they're not in use? You don't want to have these consolidated points where drones are, accumulated at the hangars and not actually distributed to where they need. And even more importantly, what if a drone has an emergency? If a drone has an error in flight, the only real options you start running into are you're either going on a road, which is almost guaranteed catastrophic failure and loss of life. You're going into a walkway or a pedestrian area, which could lead to serious injury, or you're going to go onto private property where you could have damages. And I highlighted this question at the bottom. I don't think our insurance policies are even set up for that. Property liability and comprehensive coverage doesn't highlight what would happen in the case of a drone from a rogue operator or some negligent behavior damaging your property. And so these are things that are going to require infrastructure to really mitigate. We see the hangars, landing stations, and more particularly the routing and communications networks being critically important. Having the ability for multiple drones working on multiple networks to be able to coordinate in the case of an emergency or reserve time at a specific landing station is what's going to be required. And we're going to see a lot of this through the UTM, through the communications network, but that actually has to parlay into a physical infrastructure. And so we've been focusing very heavily at Valqari on the physical infrastructure. And the goal is to really create not a proprietary system, which we're seeing some of in the market, where only that company specific drone can use that landing station, but universal landing stations. So multiple providers from multiple different networks are able to reserve space, land, have emergency situations where they can go to a specific landing station. And by creating that standard, it's going to allow new entrants into the market much more cost effectively. We view the market as having a number of different solutions that are highly specialized. And that's everything from hospital and medical delivery, individual home deliveries, business deliveries, even emergency services deliveries. But those all have to be coordinated in some fashion on the same network. And that really goes through some of the back end stuff that we're working on at Valqari, as well as those UTMs and routing softwares that we're seeing. And the goal is that this all works in one cohesive airspace and not each one working separately with no communication in between. And so that's going to be really important to make sure that it integrates seamlessly with our everyday lives, right? Drones are not going to replace ground transportation. They're going to enhance it with new options and different capabilities. And so making sure that the logistics networks, the communication networks, and everything that's involved in our current logistics is applicable for drones is going to be critical. So I'm going to show you a video of how we're viewing this coming. This is one of our Valqari delivery stations. Um, and we build all of our landing stations to be entirely universal so they can work with virtually any drone airframe. So as you'll see, this person put a package into the landing station and it gets loaded into the drone. And now it's communicating with this receiving landing station, scheduling to make sure that it's available, going through an authentication and verification process, and then conducting a landing and dropping off the package. And so that process of ensuring that each landing station is able to communicate with the various drones on the network is how you keep drones from colliding in midair. That takeoff and landing point is really where a lot of the safety or potential collisions and different pieces start to exponentially grow. And the key to the landing stations is making sure that we remove that drone and human interaction. So the last thing we want to do is have multiple drones coming in at any given time to a specific LZ or a landing pad or whatever it may be, and that's where the humans are. So here's a few examples of what we're working on, various implementations of this to serve different use cases. Back in the mid 1800s and before, we saw a big situation, especially in Europe and the UK, where railroads were using different track sizes, right? There was standard gauge and narrow gauge and all of these different complications because there wasn't a standardization. And what ended up happening was it was very difficult to move goods from one country to the next. And the same thing is going to happen with drones. And it's not only going to be country specific, but then system specific, where each of these proprietary solutions aren't interoperable with other drone providers. And so the goal here is to create not only a standardization on the communication, but also on the infrastructure so we can ensure that there's safety across the board and everybody's adhering to the same standards. And so the key in this is providing emergency landing capabilities for drones, removing that human drone interaction, making sure that the goods being delivered by drone are secured and there's a chain of custody to ensure that, especially when you're looking at medical opportunities and reducing some of the current issues, right? Porch pirates and theft and damage that we see in the current last mile. All of that can be mitigated with drones and infrastructure that works with those drones. So to summarize, we really think that infrastructure is really the key in all of this and making sure that drones can safely move from point A to point B and really automating that entire process. It's not about just getting the package from point A to point B, but it's getting it from customer to customer or from shipper to customer or emergency service to the patient. It's making sure that at the end of the day that the human on the other end is not burdened by it, not at risk by it, and that the systems can support this in a large scale operation. And so that's really been the focus of Valqari and some of our partners.